So, how has captivity ruined the orca's chances of ever even going back into the wild? Obviously, some have been kept for a really long time. Obviously, Tillicum's been in there since he was 2. They would only be suitable for just a natural sea pen, wouldn't they? They could never go into the ocean. I mean, they're probably not. They're not equipped now, are they?
Well, probably not, because they're sort of freaks of nature now. The ones that were born in captivity are born from different communities, different entire cultures, and so they're sort of a cultural hybrid as well as a genetic hybrid that doesn't exist in nature. And yet, they also inherited everything that has been passed down through the generations for 6 to 10 million years since orcas first were, emerged from dolphins. So they have that sort of, innate capability to live in an ocean setting. So it seems to me that just speaking biologically, and I know there's a lot of politics and economics in the way and a lot of naysaying and complicated human obstructions, before it could happen. But from their point of view, biologically, even those captive-born orcas could go into a sea pen, and they could sort of recreate their own society within that, and just look at it for months and years and see how they do there and if they get robust. And it would take sort of a lot of consensus building to see how to do this, but it would be possible, I think, for them, some of them anyway, case by case, to be able to go out into the open ocean and then again come back if they want and have a care station, a welcoming hospitality crew right there, able to keep them companions, keep them company and be there for them in any way that they want, with foraging, give them some food, just talk to them, even get in the water with them. There's no reason to hold back and deprive them of that companionship with humans if that's what they seek. If they're coming to be with humans, let them do that. Otherwise, let them make their own choices. And I think that's entirely doable. It's just got to be done very cautiously and carefully. But I don't really see any threat to the wild populations. I don't think there would be any interbreeding because each community, their entire mating game is intact within the community. It doesn't extend outside. They have very strict rules about all their mating practices, and that doesn't include strangers. So I don't think there's really any threat of any interbreeding with wild populations.
So from that interbreeding, obviously that has happened a lot at SeaWorld and the marine parks because they've only got a few males in their possession. So that is obviously a condition of the California Coastal Commission that they have to stop breeding if they're going to build these new bigger tanks. But I think obviously they're going to appeal the condition and SeaWorld I think are trying to sue them at the moment. If they don't win, if they end up not suing them or it doesn't go to plan, what do you think SeaWorld's next steps would be? Do you think they would still build it? Because, if they don't, they're going to look like they only wanted to do that to breed more, which is obviously what they did, but they're going to get a whole press storm and bad publicity if they don't.
Well, I think they're being revealed in terms of their plans that they want to become a puppy mill for orcas, that they want to become the breeding, production center for orcas around the world, because there are these, orca parks opening up in Dubai and in China and in Russia, and they're trying to expand the industry that way. And I think they want the San Diego facility to be the breeding production site for all that. And I think that's being revealed, and that's what the California Coastal Commission has clamped down on very effectively. And I think they're in a stew right now. they've said that they will do something, that they will react with some kind of legal effort. They're not saying what it would be, because I think they can see their lawyers are telling them that they really don't have a case. Coastal Commission was completely within their authority to prohibit any captive breeding, and they really don't have any way out. I think they're just trying to put up this aggressive front that seems to be in their sort of corporate culture to do that. That's why they appealed the OSHA decision back in 4 or 5 years ago, that led to the hearing that was one of the best parts of the movie Blackfish, was what came out of that hearing. So that was, and they lost anyway. So it was a very bad move for them to do that. And their $10 million ad campaign to try to convince people that SeaWorld is good, it's just aggression for its own sake, as if they're just sort of putting up this front of bluff and bluster. And I think that's what they're doing again. But the authorities, and really it's the whole general climate of public opinion, has shifted so dramatically, and is still shifting more and more actively, to tell SeaWorld your whole idea, your whole business model of keeping orcas in captivity for entertainment is bankrupt, corrupt, and should not go on. It's a thing of the past that we want to grow beyond now. And that's just got to finally someday become apparent in the boardrooms at SeaWorld, and they've got to devise a whole new business model. So, I don't know when that day will come, but it's got to happen. They've got to, clean house. There's a lot of the old guard there that probably will never be able to make that shift, but they've just got to bring in some new people that can start a new corporation with a new model. And we have some ideas for them, but, so I think they could stay in business and make money, but just not holding orcas or dolphins or marine mammals in most cases in captivity.
I think that the stocks went down after the commission vote as well, and they have been going down drastically for SeaWorld.
It's really been since August of 2014 that when they announced their previous quarter's earnings, and they were so terrible that the investing world realized right then, this is a toxic company in terms of their stock value. And it dropped from the high 20s to the mid to upper teens, and it has not moved, really. It's been around, 16 to 18 ever since then, and still is. It dropped another 5% after the commission voted, but it's not going to come back.
No,
they just haven't gotten that message yet.
They will.
They will. They'll have to.
So just if we could just briefly talk about most recent news of the flooding at Marineland France.
Yes.
And awful news, followed the flooding. Quite a lot of animals had died. I know a lot of turtles and other fish have died. And unfortunately, Valentin died, the orca who spent 19 years there.
Right.
And it's clear that Marineland France are completely unprepared, because I think they're planning to open in January, reopen. But the orcas are still in that incredibly muddy, dirty water, and so are the sea lions and all the other animals. And are we right in thinking that they knew that this is sort of a flood possible area, and they still built there?
They should have known. This was an extreme flood for sure, but the main problem was it knocked out power, and that could happen anywhere. It also, soiled the water for a lot of the animals, and but when it knocks out power, it knocks out the pumps and the filtration system that cleans it out. They've got to flush those tanks, or it builds up and will make the animals sick. And the same is true in the aquarium. We are very worried about what might happen there in Miami, because they are right in Hurricane Alley. A lot of hurricanes go right overhead, and in 1992, Hurricane Andrew devastated the park, and 6 sea lions were electrocuted from that hurricane, and that could happen any time. And if the electricity there goes out for 24 hours, I mean, she could start, Lolita in her tank could start to have to swim in her own, excrement, and it could start to make her very sick. So we're concerned about that, and to our knowledge, they don't have any kind of a contingency plan. They're required to have one, and they say, oh, yes, they have one, but they've never produced any sign of a contingency plan, so I'm not sure they really do. That came out during the BP oil gusher in the Gulf of Mexico a few years ago. If that oil had gotten into a certain current, it would have swept it right around the south tip of Florida and right into Biscayne Bay, and that's the water that is pumped in for Lolita. So I don't know how they would have protected her from that. So, there's just a lot of contingencies that I don't think they're ready for. So it's risky in so many ways to keep her in captivity there. It's just a very tenuous, scary existence, and they ought to get her out of there.
It does seem like they're not prepared at all. But hopefully from this Marineland incident, that would push more people to question, like Miami, to actually maybe physically, see. Maybe they need to come out and tell everyone what their contingency plan is, because if there is a high possibility of that, no one would want to keep Lolita in there, if that's a possibility that can happen.
I know, but once it gets to an emergency situation, it's very hard to mitigate, to do anything about it. So I hope they can foresee that and think about her, what's best for her, and get her out of that very dangerous situation as soon as possible. There's so many ways that it threatens her life to remain in captivity, and a return to her native waters where she was born and raised, the natural setting would be there's no reason to fear any problem from that. It's something that even in the veterinary manuals, it's therapeutic to return a sick or injured marine mammal to its native habitat. So I don't see any health issue or any danger in her returning home.
And finally, just my last question. What can people do to, to get involved in trying to spread the message? What would you advise personally?
Well, first of all, and I'm not the first to say this, don't buy a ticket. Just avoid going to any facility that exploits whales or dolphins. The swim with programs, any place that has to keep them confined is doing a terrible disservice to those whales or dolphins. Our focus, of course, for over 20 years has been on Lolita at the Miami Seaquarium. And so for her, and she is in a very unique situation compared to all of the SeaWorld orcas or any others around the world, she is by far the best candidate to return to her native waters. And we just ask people to become familiar with our release, our rehabilitation and retirement plan with potential release to her family if all goes well. Enough to have confidence in it, to be able to see that it's safe for her, that it's professionally carried out. There's no reason to see that there's any real risk, any significant dangers along the way, from the lifting her in the sling, transport to the airport in Miami, the flight to her waters here, the tow on a barge, the 20 miles out to her sea pen, the lowering into her native waters, the care and companionship that she'll get there from her human caretakers, right there, the provisioning if necessary, any of the medical help. I'm sure she's getting heavily medicated now where she is for a variety of real or potential illnesses, and those really treat the effects of captivity. So she wouldn't need to continue those regimens of medications, although they could be phased out. gradually over time with, a lot of veterinary supervision. But all of that has been done, is in the books, and can be done very easily, and with professionals on board to oversee every step of the way. There's no reason for any real, worry about anything happening to her. So I would just ask people to understand that, because that's our greatest obstacle, is that people have believed the decades of messaging that it would kill her or any captive orca. They said that about Keiko too, to return to their native waters. And that is just so false. I need people to be able to answer that with confidence that, no, that's not true. Otherwise, they're confused, and that means they don't know what to recommend. And we want them to recommend that she be allowed to retire in her home waters as soon as possible.
Thank you so much, Howard, for taking time out of your weekend to do this. I really appreciate it.
Great.
Hopefully this will help spread the message that keeping orcas captive and using them for entertainment needs to stop.